Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Next Chapter. I am your host, Whitney Clark, and today we are joined by Riley Sager, a familiar name for all of my thriller lovers out there, and we know there are so many of you. It's such an exciting and important genre. He's out with a new book called With a Vengeance. He's a New York Times bestselling author who's written 9 novels in more than 35 countries with more than 3 million copies sold across the world. So Riley, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So tell readers about the new book, what they can expect as they get ready to pick it up.
Right. So With a Vengeance is about a young woman named Anna Matheson, who in 1942, 6 people were responsible for destroying her family, basically. So it is 12 years later. She's invited those 6 people onto a luxury train that's traveling nonstop from Philadelphia to Chicago overnight. And her goal is to confront them, get them to confess their crimes, and then lead them to authorities waiting at the station where she has provided proof of their crimes to them. Well, very shortly into the trip, one of the passengers is murdered. And it's clear that someone else on that train also has a plan for revenge. And so Anna finds herself in this very strange position of having to save the people that she hates the most. And so I just thought it was a really cool twist on this usual revenge plot, because normally it's, oh, you did something to me, I'm going to kill you. In this case, the last thing she wants is for them to die. She wants them to suffer in prison for a very, very long time. And so to be in this weird predicament where she literally has to save the lives of the people she wants to destroy.
And she invites them on this train ride, as you mentioned, but doesn't really give an idea as to even who's inviting them. She doesn't say who's inviting them when those invitations are sent out. Why was, on the train, like they're physically on the train throughout this book, why was that important for you to include that?
Well, I just thought it would be fun. Like, that's above all else. I thought it would be really cool to have a book set entirely on a train. And when you think about train books, you naturally think of Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express. And that was definitely an inspiration. But I also thought it might be kind of cool to add another Agatha Christie plot, and then there were none to the mix. And so it became this mashup of the two of them. And just the train setting is very interesting to work with, because everyone has seen a movie set on a train. Everyone has read a book set on a train. And so it comes with these expectations. And my job was then to lean into some of these expectations or subvert them and do a little mix of both to keep readers on their toes.
I felt a little claustrophobic reading this. I was just thinking about being stuck on a train myself. Do you have any fears and phobias yourself that you channel into your books?
I do occasionally. Usually it's more supernatural things. Like I have a book, Home Before Dark, which is a haunted house kind of book. And in that one, I definitely used my own fears and superstitions and things like that in it. With a Vengeance, it was more just trying to play around with the genre. I was inspired in part by all these great train scenes that were in movies at the time. There was the great scene in the Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. There was Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. There was Bullet Train. And just the idea of having this plot set entirely on a train would, yes, bring claustrophobia, but also it made it very interesting to have the characters bounce around and bounce off each other. Like, there's nowhere to hide on a train, basically. And when there's a killer on the loose, what do you do?
It's a spoiler-free zone, so we won't, give any indication of what happened. But, some of the passengers consider jumping from the train. Do you use the train frequently? Like, when was the last time you yourself took a ride on a train?
I used NJ Transit about a month ago going into New York City. And that's about it. When I first had the idea for the book, I thought, wow, it would be cool if I wrote this on a train, like just book Amtrak cross country and just write. That idea lasted for maybe like 5 minutes before I realized that's such a dumb idea.
Also,
I have a
not really.
perfectly nice office. I can use that. Yeah.
Also, not the most comfortable way to travel cross
No.
country. I've heard that it sounds like this romantic experience, but then when you're doing it, I don't think that it's that romantic. Like not being able to sleep, not being able to move too much.
I took an overnight train in France when I did a trip in high school, way, way, way many years ago. And we thought like, oh, we're so excited. This is fun. This is going to be so neat. And we were crammed in like to this little tiny room with 6 bunk beds in it. So there were 3 bunk, and it just was the most claustrophobic, not a good night's sleep at all.
And when you were writing this book, what sort of research did you have to do about how trains operated, how trains were built, sort of how things worked during that period of time in the 1940s and 30s?
It's very interesting. I did so much research into how trains worked at the time and what trains worked because it was an era when we were going from like steam trains to what they called streamliners, and train travel was such an important part of the country back then. That is how most people traveled. And so I did so much research. And then when I started getting into the nitty gritty of the plot, I realized most of that research would just have to go out the window because the plot wouldn't work if it was following like the realities of train travel at
Right.
that time. So I'm glad I did the research because it was fascinating and it taught me what I couldn't use in the book. So the train in the book is, I like to think of it as a movie train. It looks like a regular train, but it really bears no resemblance to how train travel worked back then.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that there are people out there who are very knowledgeable about their trains, and some of them will read this book and go, that's not how this worked. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And so I'm trying to get it out there like, I know this is not how it worked entirely back then. This is fiction. It's a movie train. Just go along for the ride.
Disclaimer for readers out there.
Yes.
Don't take the train talk too seriously. It's really about the plot and the characters and the thrill of it and the thrill of the ride. When did you actually start working on this book?
I'm on a book a year schedule, and by this point, it's pretty much like clockwork. I start on January 2nd every year,
Wow.
and then I have a finished book by Christmas, and then it comes out the next June.
Is it tough to keep up that schedule?
Yes and no. Sometimes it's just, if I'm really excited about a project and there are no obstacles in my way, I can just cruise to the finish line very quickly. Other times when there are unexpected things in the writing pop up like, oh, this doesn't work at all, or oh, I have to change the ending, or oh, this character doesn't work, where it can be tough to really meet that deadline. But I'm lucky that I work with a great team. I've been with my editor for a very long time. And so we kind of know where I should be at every single point in the year. And so I've not missed a deadline yet. So fingers crossed that doesn't happen in the future.
Okay, I have my fingers crossed for you. Here we are,
Thank you.
beginning of May. Where are you at with the book that you're writing this year?
I'm halfway done.
Okay. I love that. You gotta stay on schedule, even for, creative types. That would be so important, I can imagine. And I see you're joining us from this room you have books behind you. Is this your office where you do most of your writing?
This is my office. Yes, this is where the magic happens. I spend a lot of time in this room. And the closer we get to my deadline, the more I become like just tuned into this place where I need to finish the book. But it's a very nice room to be in, I have to say.
You mentioned your editor and some of the people you've been working with for a long time, and I think readers might not realize like what a big role editors play in the final product. how do you work with your editor to make sure what you're putting out is the best book that you can? How many changes are made? Kind of run us through that process.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I have to get her approval for the book. So I always write a one-page synopsis and say, this is my next book. And they do have the right to say, maybe that's not the best thing, try again. Luckily, that has not happened to me yet. So my editor and I seem to be on the same wavelength in that regard. She usually says, yes, do it. Can't wait to read it. And I know that if any point in the process I'm struggling, I can go to her and give her what I've written so far and say, I don't know what I'm doing. Can you help me? Sometimes she'll read the first 100 pages or so and be like, this is great, keep going. I'm like, no, I need your advice. And other times she offers helpfulness. So a lot of it is just talking me off like this weird ledge of self-doubt that I think all writers experience, where I think in the middle of every book, a writer just stops and says, I don't know what I'm doing. And so the editor, she can come along and be like, you know what you're doing. Just keep on doing it. And if it doesn't work, we'll fix it. And so she offers a lot of value advice in that regard. And then when I have the book actually finished, then she can really dig in. And she finds things that are missing that I didn't realize, and things that need adjusting, finessing, sometimes outright total revision. And so it's a really nice process to go through. And I really appreciate that I have someone who I know is in my corner and that I trust implicitly. That doesn't mean we always agree, because sometimes she'll say, like, I think you should change this. And I'll be like, no. And we hash it out. And so she'll let me keep anything in the book if I justify it. Okay. So I have to like really fight sometimes for what I believe in and for the book.
Was there anything in this latest book that you really had to fight to keep in that's not going to spoil the ending for anyone?
No, but the ending changed.
Oh, wow.
There was a lot in this book that after I turned in the first draft, I was a little uncertain about. And she confirmed that uncertainty and said, I don't think this and this quite work. Oh. So we need to kind of go back to the drawing board. And so there was a lot of revision going on.
Wow.
And she was absolutely right. And the book is so much better than that first draft, and so much better than I actually thought it could be. And that's the rewarding part, when you have a finished book in hand and I think, this is what I envisioned all along and I didn't quite know how to get there. And I'm here and it's actually even better than I thought it was.
Yeah. You're known for your twisty, endings, unexpected plot twists. Do you come up with those plot twists before you start writing? Do you already know that's where it's headed?
Pretty much, yes. I always start with like a basic 1 or 2 sentence plot, who the main character really is going to be, and then what's the ending and what's the twist? Because I need to know like how to get there. Like sometimes if I'm writing blind and I don't know where it's going to end, then I could just go off on all these weird tangents. And so I need sort of this, to use the train analogy, I need an arrival point. And that's the way I can stay on track in the writing of the book.
Is it hard for you to come up with ways to continue to surprise readers?
Oh gosh, yes. That is the hardest part of my job. It's great being known for my twist. It's also a little bit of a burden being known for my twist, because I know readers, when they buy a book from me and when they start reading, they're expecting that twist and they're waiting for it. And I do not want to let them down. And so it is tough to just keep surprising people year after year. And making things even more difficult is the fact that there are so many great thriller writers out there who come up with such incredible twists. And I read them and my jaw drops and I just go, oh, I wish I could have thought of that. And so it's tough to, keep up with the competition, so to speak. And every year I think the bar is raised for twists that are shocking and jaw-dropping, but in hindsight, they have to also make sense in the world of the book. You have to plant those little clues along the way, or else readers will feel cheated. Mm-hmm. And so it is a very delicate balance that you have to strike.
Of all the books you've written, what is the one you hear about the most from readers in terms of sort of the shock value and the surprise?
It is a book of mine that came out in 2022 called The House Across the Lake. And I warned readers in advance, it's banana pants. It's just it is, no one will see the twist coming. And when they get to it, it's just like, I knew I was onto something when a good friend of mine who reads everything I write very early on in the process, she got to that twist and she just texted me like in all caps, WTF, but she did not use the accuracy. She used the full words. And she's like, what is going on in this book? And I knew like, oh, I have something here. This is good.
Yeah.
And so that is a twist that it's actually pretty controversial. Some of my readers are like, I can't believe you did that. How could you do that? And others are like, yes, we love this twist. So I know that when it gets such a reaction that it was worth doing.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about, again, the new book that you're out with A Vengeance. In part of the book, Anna says she's inspired by films like Strangers on a Train, The Narrow Margin, and The Lady Vanishes. Are these films you had already seen prior to writing this? What other films had inspired you? You kind of already mentioned this, but what other films have inspired your work?
Yeah, I'd seen all of them. There's, Hollywood has a great history of train movies, especially in the 40s and 50s. Film noir and trains like seemed perfect together. But one surprising inspiration, and people still don't quite believe this, but it's true, is the movie White Christmas.
Oh, I love that movie.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite movies. And there's a scene early on where they take a train from Florida to Vermont. And they hop on board and the conductor says, sorry, the train is full. You have to sit up all night in the club car. But you don't see a single other person on that train other than the four of them and the conductor. And that really got me thinking about, yeah, I think this train needs to be an empty train. And there's a reason. So the train in the book is completely empty except for Anna, her assistant, and the 6 people that she brought on board. And I just thought that was such a great atmospheric situation to be in. We're on this big luxury train and it's completely empty. And there's a reason for that, which I won't go into, but it almost made the train feel haunted in some way. And I just thought that was really fun to explore. And it gave them leeway to like use every single square foot of that train. Like they're everywhere on the train. And it opened up a whole world of possibilities for like the plot.
Yeah. And it would definitely give me super creepy vibes to get invited on a train and then there's nobody else on there. That's like immediate red flag. And you are correct in that White Christmas is the last movie I was expecting you to say was part of your inspiration. I'm going to have to go back and watch that because I remember the train scene. I just don't remember not seeing anybody on there. But that's a great movie. I've read that you've also been inspired or you're a fan of Disney and Alfred Hitchcock. Is that something that started for you at a young age?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up on Disney. I'm still a Disney adult. I prefer the term Disney nerd, but to each their own. And like, if you can't really see, but like my office is just all the art on the walls is Disney related. And in fact, right over there, which I don't think you can see on camera, but is an autograph of Walt Disney that's framed. And I bought that as a gift to myself after my first book, Final Girls, made the bestseller list. And so that was my reward for a job well done. So yeah, I grew up with Disney. And I think the magic of Disney movies, especially the earlier ones, is he was not afraid to get scary. Some of his movies have very frightening scenes. And I think that really informed my thinking as a child to see these scary things and make it out okay on the other side. And then when I was in my early teens, I discovered Alfred Hitchcock and it was instant love. Like I saw Vertigo and it just blew my mind. I'm like, I didn't know they made movies like this. And I've seen pretty much all of his films. I love them, and especially the ones that he made in the 50s, like Rear Window and North by Northwest, which has a great train
Mm.
scene. And yeah, just so Alfred Hitchcock is a huge influence of mine.
Going back to the Disney movies, you're very right, and that a lot of them are pretty dark, and you don't really realize that until you get a little bit older and you rewatch. I'm thinking of Pinocchio is a little dark.
So dark.
So
Yes.
is like Dumbo. All of them have these sort of themes or scenes that I do remember being a bit scared of when I was a kid. Do you have a favorite Disney movie or a favorite sort of time of period of when Disney was making movies, like recent or some of the older ones?
Well, I mean, I my one of my favorite movies, just not Disney, but of all time, is Mary Poppins.
Mhm.
It is. I just think it's perfect, and part of it is nostalgia. I remember watching it for the first time as a little kid, like just lying on the living room floor with my sister. We got to stay up late to watch it on TV, and it was a really special experience. I watch that all the time. And I love like the stuff from the 90s, like Beauty and the Beast and The
Mhm.
Lion King and Aladdin. And I do love the early things, the Snow Whites and the Pinocchios and the Cinderellas. And the one that really impacted me a lot was their version of the Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
Mhm.
The Headless Horseman and the Flaming Jack-o'-lantern. Like we used to watch it. They used to show it like every Halloween, basically. And I just remember being like 5 or 6 and seeing that and being terrified of it, but also oddly fascinated by it all too. And so just watching that was probably one of the most formative things ever in my life because you can be scared, but also entertained and fascinated. And it just was a really good lesson to learn that scariness isn't necessarily bad for you.
At what point did you decide you wanted to write thrillers?
I think I was probably thrillers. Gosh, I don't know about like I knew I wanted to write pretty much in 6th grade when the assignment was to write like a 1-page Christmas short story and read it in front of the class. And I wrote one about like a reindeer like getting loose on my family's Christmas and causing havoc. And it got a laugh from my classmates and they loved it and I got an A and it was such a validating experience for me. And I was like, ooh, I'm hooked. I want more of this feeling. And so I think that's when my I want to be a writer started. As for thrillers, when I started writing, other than a phase like in high school where it was like very emo poetry and short stories, I think I always wanted to write thrillers because of my love of Hitchcock and suspense. And there's just something fun about being on the edge of your seat. And it turns out it's very fun creating things that keep people on the edge of their seats. So it's a very enjoyable job that I have.
I bet. You were a journalist for a long time. How
Yes.
did you go from writing fact based, working as a journalist, writing those stories, to writing fiction? Because as a journalist myself, the mindset is so hard. I can imagine because you are making sure everything's correct, and then just being able to make things up just sounds so foreign to me.
Yeah, it actually was a very valuable experience because I learned, how to work on a deadline.
Yeah.
And I learned that clarity is key. Like, and especially in the world of newspapers, you need to sort of lay out everything very clearly for the readers in order for them to get the gist of the article as soon as possible. And that helps in my writing because sometimes you read a book where things get a little bit too murky and you're not necessarily certain what's going on. And so it's helpful to have that background to know, like, this is how you write things that makes it clear to the reader what's happening at every step. It doesn't mean it's boring, but that there's clarity. And then it taught me how to be edited because in newspapers, you have an editor and they say, no, do it again. They get that red pencil out and just strike through, like, try again. And so it was a very great learning experience. And there are a lot of mystery and thriller writers out there who started in journalism. Like Laura Lippman, Connolly. There are many of us. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think we all kind of got that same experience early on.
Yeah. Yeah, not just thrillers, but I interview so many authors who were journalists and then, later in life in their 40s, they're in their 50s, they decided to, get into a new career and start writing. And it makes sense, if you're already used to writing and as you mentioned, being concise and working under a deadline, we certainly know how those deadlines work. It's weird to think about working under a deadline that's a year as opposed to, in news you have like a couple hours. I mean, there's a lot of work in between, but
Yes.
do you ever find yourself like procrastinating? Because I feel like I'm so used to working up to a deadline. Sometimes if I have longer for a project, I'm always still working up until the last minute.
Yeah, all the time. Like it usually turns out that way. And that's why it's good to have this yearly deadline,
Yeah.
because if I didn't, I don't think I'd ever finish a book. I would just be like, I have important things to watch on YouTube right now all day. And so it helps to have like that end point. And I try throughout the year to stay on track, but there's always something that comes up. And there are times when I find myself, it's a month until deadline and I have like a third of the book still yet to write. And that's when I just have to like hunker down and just ignore the world, ignore literally everyone in my life, and just be like, I'm writing. No one talk to me.
Do you ever see yourself writing in a different genre, or do you want to stick in this genre?
Oh, I absolutely want to stick in this genre. I read all genres. I know how to do this one, and I don't know how to do others. And so I think if I did try to write like science fiction or romantasy, I think they would just always end up being thrillers anyway. Like I would just, my brain would take me there regardless.
Yeah.
And so just like stay where I am. I'm very happy.
Yeah. Do you have any books you've recently read that you've loved, no matter what? Could be any genre.
I'm currently reading one called The Golden Hour, and I think the author's name is Matthew Spector, and it's nonfiction, and it's a memoir. He grew up in Hollywood, and his father was this mega agent, and his mother was a screenwriter. And it's sort of a memoir of like his family and the problems they had and their divorce and his drug addiction, but it's also about Hollywood from the 50s to the modern age and how there was such a sea change from like the old Hollywood to the new Hollywood. And he got to witness this from like his living room, basically. His father represented Marlon Brando and like Bruce Dern, and they were friends with Jack Nicholson and David Lynch. And so it was very interesting to see like the viewpoint of all of these legends just from some kid whose family just happened to work in the business.
Are you an audiobook guy, or do you actually read like a physical copy, or do you have a Kindle, or a mix of all three?
I'm all of the above. I do try to read. I prefer hardcover. So usually it's hardcover, but sometimes if I know I'm going to be traveling, it will be the ebook. And then I also get audiobooks because one of my things that I like to do is I love jigsaw puzzles. And there's nothing more relaxing to me than spending an hour or two working on a puzzle, listening to an audiobook. And so, yeah, I get a lot of reading in that way as well.
I love that. So you like, we've covered some of the movies that you like, some of the books that you like, jigsaw puzzles. What else do you do just in your free time, in your real life, to sort of decompress and have fun when you're writing some of these stories that can be a little dark, be a little twisty, sort of keep people on the edges of their seat?
Yeah, it's weird. Like because I do work from home in this office, there is a tendency to take my work with me outside of this room. And so I try not to do that. And so I usually do like a cutoff at the end of the day where it's like, okay, it's 5 o'clock. I'm not thinking about this book for the rest of the day. So I will cook dinner. I love cooking. I will have a cocktail. I love having a cocktail. And then just, just chilling. There's so much great TV right now. And so it's nice to just lie on the couch and just watch a really great show.
What's a show that you love right now, or something that's made you laugh, or that you've gotten into really quickly?
I love Poker Face, and that just came back. That is such a great show with Natasha Lyonne. And it's funny, I will be traveling to London for the first time this summer.
Oh.
And so in an odd preparation, I subscribe to BritBox. So
Oh,
I've
okay.
recently discovered BritBox.
Oh.
And there is a show on there called the Sister Boniface Mysteries. And it's like Murder She Wrote, but it is a nun. And it
Oh,
is
interesting.
delightful.
Some
It's
of
murder, but it's like the coziest type of show you can imagine. And so it's such a balm against like the realities of the world.
Yeah. There's something comforting specifically about British shows like the British Baking Show, which I'm sure you've heard of or seen. I mean, that's like
Hmm.
pretty widely available on Netflix. But even when I've been to London or some of these other cities, even watching like their news or for some reason is more like comforting. I don't know. Something about the BBC is so comforting, and I don't know why. So I have my mom watches a lot of those British shows as well, and it's like all of them you can kind of do no wrong.
Yeah, I think it's just this weird difference in cultures. Like
Yeah.
in America, we're so expressive and so adamant and so into our feelings. And the British are just like,
Yeah.
just they roll with the
Yep.
punches. And
Here
so
we are.
there's not as much dramatics and
Yeah.
it's soothing.
It is.
Even
It
when they're
is.
talking about murder,
Yeah.
it's soothing.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want people to know about With a Vengeance? Because I do find it hard to sometimes talk about your books without, giving too much away. And again, on the podcast, we try to keep it spoiler free.
Like, yeah, it's with a vengeance. It tackles some serious themes. Like, Anna's definitely grieving still, and it raises these really juicy questions about the morality of revenge. And that was something I wasn't expecting until I was writing it. And I'm like, oh, this is quite interesting. What is the nature of revenge? Like, is revenge worth it? Really, what is the best form of revenge? Is it just killing someone, or is it their confinement for the rest of their lives? And just all these kind of thorny issues, like, because she does get the opportunity to kill some of these people and she steadfastly refuses. And it's just what it would be like to try to have to help someone who literally destroyed your life.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was very fascinating to explore. And she was a great character to write because she's so tough. Like, she's prepared for this journey. She is going to get revenge. And so she's done like fight training. She's psychologically locked in. And then to have all of her plans upended.
Mm-hmm.
And now she has to follow a new plan. And how does she do that? And so she was so much fun to write because as tough as she is, she's also just so vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she's still grieving, she's still raw, and also unpredictable. You never quite know what she's going to do. And so that was wonderful to write and explore.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think it's just fun. It's a ride. Like, I wanted to write a bullet train of a book. Like, it leaves the station and you're off, and it is not stopping till the very end.
And it's such a fast-paced, quick read, and I mean that in the best way possible. I sat down to start the book, and then all of a sudden I was about 25% in. It just went by that quickly. She invites these 6 people on the train. Was it difficult for you to come up with the personalities of these 6 people that she was, seeking revenge against, or did that come quite easily to you?
It was difficult because I didn't want all of them to be outright hissable villains. Like, I wanted there to be nuance there. Like, they all have a reason for doing what they did. And I wanted to explore that reason a little bit. At the same time, making it clear, like, they all did something horrible, but some of them are more horrible than others. And it was fun to differentiate those levels of horribleness and to just give them an interior life, because I thought it would have been very boring to just have these just flat villains with no personality and no character whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
So it was an interesting challenge to come up with, who are these people? Why did they do it? What makes them tick? And do they feel remorse?
Mm-hmm.
Because some of them do, some of them don't.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, like, which ones survive to the end of the trip? That was another thing that I had to decide, like, who lives and who dies in this scenario.
And some of them you almost feel kind of bad for them, or at least you maybe understand sort of why they did what they did. Is it important for you to have these sort of quote unquote villains that can potentially be relatable to readers?
Oh, absolutely. I think the most interesting villains are the ones that you do see yourself in a little bit. To just know, okay, if things had been a little different for me, maybe I would have ended up exactly like them. And the fine line is you don't want readers to think that you're justifying their actions, but you also want readers to understand their actions. And so I try to make my villains as well-rounded as the main character.
Okay. If you had to describe the book in one word, what would it be?
One word. Oh gosh.
How about 3 words?
3 words. Nonstop thrills.
Okay, sure. We'll go with that. Nonstop thrills on a train.
Nonstop might actually could be considered one word because
Okay.
it's so yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll give you 2 words.
2
Nonstop
words.
thrills. And then is there anything else you can tell us about what you're working on right now?
I can't.
Okay.
I
okay.
find that, like, it's I always equate it with like a balloon full of helium, and the more I talk about it, the more I let the helium out. And if I say too much, then the balloon is just flat on the floor.
Okay. We don't want that.
So I can't say too much. It'll be out next summer.
Okay.
Unless there's a really horrible, like, writer's block occurs. And it's gonna be a little bit scary.
Okay. Okay.
With a Vengeance is not scary in the least. Like, in the past, I've dabbled with some horror elements and some supernatural elements. This has none of that. It's a very straightforward thriller, and I love it. But the next one is going to be maybe a little bit creepy.
Okay. Creepy. We like that. Stick to those deadlines.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Riley, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.